Anyone who's been keeping up with video game news will know that next generation consoles are right around the corner. 2020 is looking like the likely prospect for their release, and Microsoft and Sony are both gearing up to present what they have in store for us. When it comes to Microsoft, reports seem to suggest that we're going to at least get glimpses of next generation Xboxes at E3 2019. As for Sony, their plans are unknown. They have opted out of E3 2019. But even if we don't know what their announcement plans are like, we do know that they have already taken the first shot by teasing aspects of the PS5 hardware. Recall that back in April 16th, 2019, Sony talked to website Wire for an exclusive interview in regards to some of the features we can expect for PlayStation 5. In this interview, Mark Cerny, who was lead architect for PlayStation 4 and is now lead architect for PlayStation 5, has confirmed a number of features and functionalities that we can anticipate. Now, one of the first things he emphasized was that PS5 is definitely not coming in 2019, which further corroborates theories, rumors, and speculation that next gen will indeed begin in fall 2020. And then he talked a bit about the core components of the PS5. The CPU will apparently be comprised of an AMD Ryzen CPU with 8 cores and a 7 nanometer Zen 2 architecture. That's all mumbo jumbo to me, but a lot of you hardware enthusiasts probably know what they're talking about. The general gist seems to be that it is pretty powerful hardware. It is a pretty powerful CPU. And then as far as GPU is concerned, we are looking at a Radeon Navi, and they haven't provided specifics, but they did confirm it is going to support ray tracing, which is this software features that allows games to simulate the way lights bounce, and that creates very realistic reflections and lighting effects. On top of graphics, ray tracing will also apparently enhance audio. They kept touting what's called 3D audio that allows players to kind of be more immersed in the game by getting more accurate directional auditory input. Another major point of focus during this Wire interview were loading times. Mark Cerny told Wire that Sony's striving to improve loading times by including a customized, specialized solid-state drive in the architecture of PS5. It's no secret that loading times have always been sort of a major crux of consoles. On PC, you can kind of really upgrade your hardware to a point where loading times can be minimized. Not so in consoles. Loading times are always, in the 15 to 30 seconds range if you're dealing with a AAA game with a lot of graphical fidelity. But with PS5, Sony's trying to focus on ensuring that they can mitigate that, and the implementation of a custom solid-state drive will seemingly go a long way if the demos shown to Wire are any indication. There's this demo that Mark Cerny booted up for website Wire showing Insomniac's Spider-Man running on both PS4 Pro and PS5 in 4K. And this PS5 is of course a development kit, and according to Wire, this was a slower speed version of the PS5, so the final version might actually be more powerful and faster. Mark Cerny put up 2 demos, one for loading times in which Spider-Man fast traveled, and on the PS4 Pro it took 15 seconds for everything to load, whereas on this PS5 dev kit, it took a mere 0.8 seconds for everything to load, which is obviously an enormous difference. And another demo Mark Cerny showed off was how fast assets are rendered with the new hardware. So on the PS4 Pro, they showed the camera panning across Manhattan, and it could only go so fast, about as fast as Spider-Man can swing his web in the game, in the final game. But in the PS5, the way Wire described it was that it was as if the camera was attached to a fighter jet and it just kept going. And the PS5 dev kit kept up, no problem. Everything got rendered in at full detail, no problem, at incredible speed. So bottom line is that PS5 is going to be way more powerful than the PS4. This is just kind of what happens with each new generation of consoles. The hardware upgrades are substantial, so no surprises there, but the demos shown to Wire were behind closed doors back in April, but Sony recently held this presentation in Japan where they teased aspects of PlayStation 5, and they actually showed off the same demo they did to Wire to sort of journalists and people who attended this meeting, and somebody who filmed the presentation, or a portion of the presentation where they show the demo, was Takahashi Mochizuki, who is an editor for the Wall Street Journal. So he took to Twitter to post this captured video, and you can see right here just how much faster PS5 loads games and how much faster it renders in assets as the camera moves around the game world. Check it out.
これに比較して現在開発中の次世代機では約 0.8 秒でシーンを読み込み切り替えることができます。次にキャラクターの動きをスパイダーマンが速度を上げながら移動するシーンを例に比較します。 PS4 Pro では移動速度を上げていくとその性能制約から描画が追いつかなくなります。販売中の PS4 版ゲームではキャラクターの移動速度に制限をかけることでこれを防いでいます。一方、現在開発中の次世代機ではスパイダーマンがニューヨークの街中をスピードの制約なく移動することができます。この2つの比較デモは PS4 ゲームスパイダーマンの素材を用いて2週間程度で撮影しました。
I'll remind you again that this is running on 4K on both consoles, on the PS4 Pro and the PS5 dev kit. And now it's been confirmed PS5 will support 8K, which seems like overkill. I think 4K will for the most part be standard, but who knows, maybe like VR could use that 8K functionality so that each lens could be as high resolution as possible, 4K on each side maybe, or lower fidelity games like, I don't know, Minecraft maybe could get away with implementing 8K resolution since it's not super graphics intensive. Personally, I'd much rather have 60 frames per second as the standard. I don't care that much about resolution, not anymore at least. 4K is good enough, honestly. I really don't think we need 8K. I feel like we're getting diminishing returns at that point. Anyway, I digress. As you saw, the presentation showed significantly faster loading times and significantly faster camera speed when it comes to rendering and traversing through the world. On the PS4 Pro, you saw how if the camera went too fast, it kept chugging and loading, whereas on the PS5 dev kit, it was no problem. The camera just kept going, no freezes, no stutters, all the details rendered. Pretty cool stuff. Now, I do think aspects of this presentation are misleading because we are talking about a current-gen game running on next-gen hardware. It's like if somebody tried to show off how powerful PS4 is by loading in a PlayStation 3 game. It just, it doesn't send that strong of a message. It is obvious that older generation games will run much faster on new generation hardware. That's a given. The real test, I think, will be how fast next generation graphics will load on the new hardware. Once you up the graphics and all the new rendering techniques, I'm wondering if the loading times will be able to keep up with the graphics. I won't be fully convinced until they show all these new titles running on these new engines with significantly higher graphical fidelity running on the new hardware and seeing the loading times and the rendering of assets that way. It's a question of will loading and rendering times scale linearly to the increase in graphics, or are the hardware upgrades extensive enough or being optimized in such a way that even with the next generation graphics, loading times will be reduced dramatically? Me personally, from where I'm sitting, I do get the sense that in PS5, loading times will generally be faster. It does seem as though Sony's actually focusing on making PS5 a machine that loads games faster, especially through that custom solid-state drive. It's highly doubtful that next-gen titles will load in as little as 0.8 seconds, but at the same time, maybe we can expect games to now load, between 5 to 10 seconds instead of 15 to 30. It seems like this is a big focus for Mark Cerny, that this is a major aspect of how the PS5 architecture is designed, so we'll see what happens. Should Sony succeed in this endeavor, I think it's going to be a big deal from both the consumers' end and the developer's end. On the consumer's end, obviously, less loading times means, less waiting around doing nothing. It's a better experience when everything feels seamless, when loading is faster, when you can just stay in the game with as little pause as possible. And then on the developer side of things, this enhanced hardware, the faster loading, could change many aspects of how they design levels. Keep in mind that a huge part of game and level design is trying to hide loading times and the rendering of assets. You play a game like God of War, for example, and one of the most impressive aspects about that game is that it is all one shot and there doesn't seem to be any loading whatsoever. And as a result, it feels like the entire world exists constantly. But that's obviously not the case. It only feels that way because the developers did such a good job hiding the loading times, hiding when assets behind you are taken out and then the assets in front of you or that you're about to walk into are brought in. But if you look behind the scenes, you can probably see, mountains covering up, how entire areas are disappearing, taken out so that memory can be allocated to stuff that's going to be in front of you as you're walking through a tunnel or whatever. That's just sort of what happens in a game. When you move from one area to the next, certain things are loaded out and other things are loaded in. Or if you can still see something in the distance, they might replace the model of, the buildings and stuff with lower poly count versions of those models. It is all an elaborate illusion that sells you on the notion that you are in this constantly existing world that is actually, in reality, constantly shifting pieces around to ensure that the hardware can take it. So with PS5, if it does indeed offer more flexibility and faster speeds in terms of loading times and rendering assets, developers can really go crazier with level design. They can just make areas more expansive, make everything feel even more seamless. They can design levels less around trying to hide loading and rendering and more around, just their vision and what they actually want to implement. So yeah, assuming that faster loading really is going to be as big of a deal as Mark Cerny and Sony in general is making it out to be for PS5, I'm excited to see how this will be leveraged by developers to elevate their game design. With all that out of the way, here are a few more things that Sony mentioned during the event in Japan, starting with the fact that apparently they're going to support PlayStation 4 for 3 more years. Now, PS5 will be backwards compatible, so even if you get a PlayStation 5, you'll be able to play PS4 games, and so the transition is going to be a lot smoother from current gen to next gen, which is one of Sony's big goals. That's fantastic. They also confirmed that PS5 will have Blu-ray support, so physical media will still be available alongside digital media, so downloading games, and streaming, aka cloud gaming. Cloud gaming in particular is probably going to kick into full gear next gen. It'll be interesting to see how Sony will participate in that. Obviously, they've already got the ball rolling with PlayStation Now, but it's still not quite there, and now that other game companies are stepping their game up, trying to get into the game streaming market, it'll be interesting to see what Sony will achieve on that front. And finally, Sony did confirm that titles like Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2, and Death Stranding are PlayStation 4 titles. There are rumors circulating that these are going to be made PlayStation 5 launch titles because we haven't heard about them, but Sony affirmed that these are still PS4 titles. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a cross-gen release where they come out on PS4 and then on PS5 as well, or a scenario in which all of these games are given enhanced graphics and ported to PS5 down the line. It's kind of what happened with like Last of Us, for example. It released on PS3 and then a remaster version was released on PS4 later. We'll see what happens on that front, but if you are a PS4 owner and don't think you'll be able to afford a PS5 quite yet, don't worry, all of these games are still coming to the current gen console. And yeah, that's all the information about PS5 I have to share with you today. I'm sure a lot more will come along as the year progresses, and I'll be sure to stay on top of that. Look forward to more news on that front. In the meantime, let us know in the comments below what you think about what you saw in that clip showing the Spider-Man loading and rendering times, and what you think about the features and hardware details that have been confirmed so far for PS5. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.